Today, I really wanted to address an issue I find a lot of my friends are going through, and I went through within my relationships also. So, as you can see, I'm going to be speaking English for most of the live. And um, yeah, I think that we're going to be addressing sexual boundaries within sexual relationships. And I really wanted to point out that we're talking about sexual relationships. So not like friendship, because it's different. It really sets out different types of boundaries, and that's healthy for you to have boundaries within your friendships, within your family relationships. But this live is precisely for people who are looking for sexual relationships and who have a hard time setting boundaries, because it's not easy, and I recognize that. So before I invite Samantha, I just wanted to say that after studying communications, my dream was to become a sexologist. Okay, so I finished. It was my last option class of my final year of university, and I was like, okay, I am doing a class that I should have been doing 3 years ago, and I wish I could actually go in sexology. So I looked for it, and then it never got to the stage where I could study sexology, because I would have to redo 3 years of university. And let's say I wanted to live a life and not be a student forever. So I looked at studies in public health. And the first person I reached out to was Samantha, because she was there for me and she was looking to get into it also. So I was like, okay, so what are you going to do? What type of research you're doing to get there, and blah, blah, blah. And I guess we live through the people that we love. Also, the experiences that they go through, we go through them with them. And I learned so much through her stories, through her experiences and her journey to get to public health. So I think it's important for us to address that also in the live today. So without any further ado, we're gonna hop her in. So I'm so excited to have her with me today. So let's see. I know how to do that now, pas vrai? So it shouldn't take too long. Est-ce qu'elle est là? She is. So let's do this. Hey, girl.
Hey.
Okay, so I'm always so excited when I hop people on my lives, because it's just so much joy to see you. And
I know.
Yeah, hi.
And this is like so weird, because it's like my first time doing a live, so I'm just like, oh my god.
Well, I have to say you look flawless, so that's one check.
Thank you.
And so in order to start, I'm gonna welcome everybody. So welcome everybody to this third episode already of Meet My People, Rencontrer Mon Monde. And I'm so happy to have you with us today. So for people who are hopping on this live and who don't know you, do you have like a little description, a little pitch of yourself, or like 3 sentences of who is Samantha Dun?
Well, I don't know if I have 3 sentences, but I think if you ask my friend to describe me, they will say that I'm someone who's very like optimistic. When I see a negative situation, I like to believe that there's a positive that can come out of it. So I think I'm also like pretty much an open book.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm not afraid to tell you how I feel. I'm not afraid to call you out on things that you shouldn't be doing, kind of things. So that's just me really as a person.
Okay,
yeah.
So would you describe yourself as an authentic and honest person?
Definitely.
Okay, because I would describe you like that.
Yeah.
And before we go further into the conversation, I have to say we go way back. Okay, so this is Samantha. This is me with a wig, and then this is Yael Taligan. So shout out to Yael, who's long-term friends, and this is something she had made for me when we were apart, when we started to being apart. Like she was in Florida and I was in Montreal, so we go way back. Okay, so
Yeah.
this discussion is just gonna be fun because we go way back. So let's hop in on the second question I have for you. What is your what what is your journey to get to public health, and what is it public health in general? So yeah.
Okay, so first I'm going to start by describing what public health is. And to make it like as simple as possible, it's basically the study of population health. And I like to think of public health as everything that's around us. You know, the air that you're breathing, the cars that you're driving, the relationship that you're making with people, the things that you go through life, you know, social determinants like racism, social justice. I feel like all of this has to do, it's incorporated into public health. But in the just like, if you go by the CDC, it's basically promoting like health, promoting like health for anyone. Like it doesn't matter of their, regardless of their social class, regardless of gender, regardless of anything. It's just making sure that you're promoting that health equity, and that you're making sure that everybody is having access to the same thing, regardless of where they're coming from.
Amazing, brilliant.
So I think, so for me, I see it when I think of public health, it's everything that's around me, you know? And I think my journey to public health was a really, really, really long journey, because growing up, I didn't think I was going to get into the health field in that way. If you know my family,
I know your family pretty well.
They're all in the medical field. And for me, I was like, nah, this is not for me. Well, plot twist. Growing up, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And when I moved to, after the earthquake, well, let's go back to the earthquake.
Yeah.
I think this is a part that played a major role into why I decided to go into public health.
Yeah.
And it was, I'm not going to go into all of the details, but it was one specific interaction that I had. And as me and my parents, we were walking to go to my aunt's house the day of the earthquake, I had made eye contact with this boy. And basically it was laying down on the, like on a wooden thing on the floor. And we made eye contact, but now that I think about it, I was thinking about it out loud, and I was like, I don't even know if that person was still alive, to be honest with you. But when we made that eye contact, I felt so helpless, because here I was with my family. We were walking to safety, and that little boy was just like laying down, and I felt so helpless. And of course, my parents were just like, you know, like, don't look around you and just go straight. I didn't realize how big of a part that played into me going into public health until later on, because up until that time, I still wanted to be a vet, and I was processing everything. Fast forward, I moved to the U.S. I go to USF. I started on the biomed track because I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a vet. And then after that, I was like, no, I'm going to be a dentist, just like my dad. And then I was like, yeah, I'm a people's person. I want to be helping people out. Yeah. And really what set it all for me was in 2013, when I got sexually assaulted, and I didn't know what had happened to me. And I got involved with this organization at USF that is called, they were the peer health educators. And I started this program called REACH. And basically within this program, what I did is that I went around and I educated the college students on, you know, like drugs and alcohol, not telling them not to do it, but providing them with the information so that they were able to do, make their own decisions
for themselves.
Exactly. And a big part of that became talking about like sexual assault awareness and knowing, like learning about consent, you know, making sure that they understood what they were doing and the consequences of their actions. Yeah. And it is at that point when I joined the program that I had realized what had happened to me. And when that had happened to me, I had friends with me, but to them, and that goes into the education portion, which is why I'm so into public health, because it's a big part of like promoting this thing, promoting health education and educating others on this topic. So it wasn't until later, after me teaching other people, that I was like, wow, this is a real issue. And going back to Haiti, this is not something that we talk about
at all.
This is not like, sexual health is something that is very taboo. We don't discuss it. We think that it's something that kids, you know, like high schoolers shouldn't know about. And for me, I swear, like I didn't know anything about like about sexual health until I moved to the US.
Yeah.
And that
which
was,
is a shame, which is such a shame,
yeah,
because we are surrounded by, information through media, through commercials, through advertising that actually
exactly.
sexualize us. And hating is even worse, especially for
Mm-hmm.
women. The way that we're perceived, the way that we're, you know, put out there in the naked format sometimes. And I'm not saying that you can't be naked and enjoying your nakedness. That's not what I'm saying. But
Mm-hmm.
more of, we are objectified very often, and we don't even notice it, and we don't even comprehend it. And
Yep.
when, for example, a young child is grinding in front of a whole crowd, it's like, okay, celebration, but there's something behind it that gets us to the point where we find this to be normal.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, you're talking about high schoolers, but sexual health begins in the youngest age, where you're actually learning
Exactly.
of your body, what is private, what is not, what type of touching is
Mm-hmm.
okay, what type of conversation you can have with your parents, with your friends, with, anyways.
And not just the conversation, the body parts, but you cannot talk about sexual health without talking about consent.
Totally.
And that is like the biggest part of it. And I think what people need to understand in general is that when you're talking to a 6-year-old child, of course, you're not going to be talking about consent in terms of sexual relationship, but explaining to them that when I say don't touch this, you don't touch this. As a parent, those are the little things that you can use to teach your kids what consent is. And also there's a thing, when you have little girls and little boys, if the boys are like hitting on the girls or hitting the girls, back in the days, they used to tell us it's because he likes you. No, that becomes a learned behavior, and they think that growing up it's okay. So if I like a girl, I'm gonna be like super jealous, or I'm gonna act as if I don't like that girl. But that's not the right thing. And it starts at a really, really young age. If you like a girl, this is how you should treat that girl, or vice versa.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, jumping to my next question, who is we're getting in debt into the subject. I think that from our personal point of view, because this is from our experiences and what we've seen, and either what we went through, what are the 3 main advice or tips, or you could go over 3, but
okay,
basics, so that if ever people on the live have questions, obviously guys, please, the little square under the live that has a question mark, that is where you ask your questions, because if not, I don't see them. I'm talking to somebody, right? So what are those advices that you can share with us, the people who are listening, and me, around boundaries within your sexual relationships? Like, I'll give an example, because a lot of people don't necessarily understand boundaries. In my life, I love to be touched. I love to have physical contact, hugging, touching, etc. And I never experienced, my parent never hit me ever. So for me, playing with a pillow or anything I found, and then I throw it, and then we're fighting, but it's like a fun and joyful fighting, let's say, does not mean the same thing for somebody who was hit maybe when they were children. And for them, this is a hard limit and a boundary that they need to put within their relationship, so that the person that is with them understands, you do not play with hitting or throwing things at me. It just doesn't work for me. And if you don't state it out, for me, it doesn't. C'est comme, for me, I've been living in a life where, throwing things, running away, playing.
Yeah, playful.
It's playful. Yeah. So,
and I think,
yeah,
that's such a very important point that you're bringing on, and I'll kind of like dive into that a little bit more, but just keep that in mind. That's such an important point, because one of the advice, I would go in order, but I'm going to kind of like skip out of order. Like, my second advice was to never assume. And what I mean by that is to never assume like what your partner might think it's okay in that relationship, because you don't always know what they've been through. And that is such an important statement. So if we're talking about like someone who might have been sexually assaulted, some touches, some things that you may do to that person might be triggering. So it's important that you're not assuming that because I like that thing, when we're having a sexual intercourse, because I like it, that doesn't mean that that person is going to be comfortable with that. Totally. But going, yeah. So I think you're bringing up a very, very important point. My first point is communication is key.
Is key.
Communication is so important. It doesn't matter if you're having casual sex. And going back to casual sex, there are different type of sexual relationship. You know, it could be oral, it could be vaginal, it could be through penetration. So that all goes into sexual boundaries.
Yes.
Okay? Of just because somebody goes down on you, that you shouldn't expect them to they shouldn't expect you to go down on them, because maybe they're not comfortable with that. And that goes into sexual boundaries. That goes into communication. So I think communication is key. Like, this is when you're going into a relationship, it's important to understand what is it that makes you comfortable, what is it that I can do to please you, and what is it that for you're not comfortable with. And if you do something to, if you touch someone and, you can sense that they're not comfortable with it, it goes into the never assuming, because they're not mind readers. They may sense that you're not comfortable with it, but if you don't have the gut to kind of like tell them, I'm not comfortable with this, because you don't have to go into the details. If it's casual sex, you don't want to go about your entire life story. That's okay. But at least letting them know that I'm not comfortable with this.
Yes, and actually, you know what? People are scared of saying it, but actually, it does make the relationship better. No matter what type of sexual intercourse you're actually playing in, it does make the action, the moment, way better to actually talk and express what you're going through, in order for that person to understand, okay, I'm not going to touch you that way. I'm not going to call you in a certain way. People think that it's okay, I'm going to slap you and call you very nasty names or whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, you can't assume I like that. You can't be, we're having a moment here, and I want to be comfortable in that moment. And if you don't open the conversation to actually say, is that okay? And it doesn't cost you anything to actually state it out. Is that okay for you? Do you want to go further? And I remember, for example, my first time, the guy I had my first time with, the guy didn't know it was my first time, okay? And I didn't want him to know. It's my thing, so don't judge anybody under the light.
No judgment, no judgment.
I had made a decision for myself at that moment, and I think it's important to actually understand you play a part in whatever happens within the moment you're having sex with somebody. You play a part by stopping them, by continuing with them, and if ever you are not comfortable and you are, in a very uncomfortable way, and this is how you get to a sexual assault, because it just surprises you so much that you are in like, okay,
that's shocking, and you just don't know what to do.
Exactly.
So, and that happens. And when Marina is talking about that sexual boundaries, we're definitely excluding that, uncomfortable moment where when things like that happen to you, it's a very different situation.
Yeah.
Very different talk, which is why at the beginning, we say that consent is always a part of that.
Yes.
If you're not talking about consent, we're not talking about sexual boundaries. If there's no consent, that's straight up sexual assault.
Totally.
That's beyond the sexual boundaries, because that person, again, going back to the never assume, they violated one of your rights. They are at that point, it's no longer sexual boundaries,
Totally. So you had a third tip, or
yes, I actually have two.
Go ahead.
So I think the other part is to respect your partner's decision. Okay. Just because you like something and they don't like it. Perfect example, let's say we're gonna go back to like going down on someone. Maybe your partner likes to go down on you and you don't like that. Okay, you don't like going down on them.
Yeah.
And when you're having that sexual intercourse, they have to respect that you have communicated to them that you don't like going down on them. Because if
Yeah.
you're in the middle of the sexual intercourse and
They're
they
pushing
want you to do that, you can feel pressured into doing it, and that's a lack of respect for your choices. So my third point is actually to respect your partner's decision, whatever that it is, because
And
you don't know.
I would add, Sam,
Mm-hmm.
this is the moment when, if you don't know your partner's decision, you can't be respecting them. So
Exactly.
it is okay to actually bring it up and
Mm-hmm.
talk about it, right?
Yes.
And actually say, is this something that you like? Do you like this better? Do you want, and God, people think once I start talking within a sexual intercourse,
Well, that
it's
part,
like,
that part.
it's so annoying.
Exactly.
Like, why are we talking? We're
Oh,
talking
it
because
breaks the mood. No, there are so many like sexy ways that you can do it and still keep going. Okay,
yeah.
so that's such an important part as well. Good point. Very good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, respecting your partner's decision is also acknowledging that they exist, they have needs, they want you in a certain way, they appreciate you enough to open that intimacy space with you, or if ever it's like a casual sex, they chose to do it with you and not the other guy or not the other girl. So it's like, for me, very important.
Yeah.
Yes. Please
And
continue.
Yeah, and I like that you're bringing the, not the other girl, not the other guy, because I think that's also a part of establishing your sexual boundaries. You might be someone who like to have sex with various people at the same time. And that's your choice. That's your body. That's your choice. That is your decision. But going into that relationship, if your partner wants to be exclusive, that is something that you need to communicate, because that's also a part of their sexual boundaries. And it's up to them to decide, well, do I want to stay in this relationship or do I want to leave? So I think that's very important as well. And on that note, do I want to leave? My last advice is really to know when to leave a relationship. After so many times of you being in that sexual in that sexual intercourse, and if that person keeps on pushing you to do things that you're uncomfortable with, and if that person is but when I like when you do this, when I like that I like when you do all those things to me, but I don't understand why you're not doing it to me. When you start feeling uncomfortable, where you're not enjoying the sex anymore, because sex should be something that's pleasurable. Okay, it should be something that you are enjoying, not something that you're doing just because just to please that other person only, because you should have your own pleasure as well, especially for women, because I feel like sometimes that's a little bit diminished. We don't see it as you should be having sex as well. We are sexual beings. Whether you want to accept it or not, we are sexual beings, and being in tune with that is so important. So I think knowing that when it's time for you to leave and move on, and that can be something that's quite challenging, because if you are at that point, your sexual boundaries have been violated. At that point, it could become into a case of domestic violence, a case of you being in a toxic relationship. So it can be very, very challenging to move on and leave that relationship. And at the time, it becomes a matter of, I need to reach out for help. I need to seek the help that I need to be able to have the support that I need during this time and leave that relationship.
And so I think it's so, so important what you're addressing right now, because putting your boundary is knowing also when it's too much for you, when you can't handle it anymore, when you don't have the resources within you to sustain that type of dynamic within the relationship that you've established. And I think that, a lot of people might be facing that question. Am I still good? Am I still feeling good within that relationship that I've established with my partner? Is this what I want for myself?
Exactly.
And those type of questions might come after a year of relationship, might come after 10 years of relationship.
Yeah. And no, I want to stop you right here, because that's something that's so important, because how you mentioned, it could happen 10 years after in the relationship. what people need to understand as well, when you're in a relationship, your boundaries can change from the first year to the year five to year 10. I think of boundaries almost like consent, because your consent can change. You might have wanted to do something at first, but now you don't want to do it anymore. That should be respected. It's the same thing with the boundaries. You might have felt comfortable with having a threesome, but now you're not as comfortable anymore after thinking about it. And your partner should respect that decision. So yes, good point.
And I want to add, just because this conversation could last forever.
I know.
I am in, like, I could add millions of things, but I want to add also, I think our perspective on a relationship or whatever type of interaction that we have with another person is determined by what we fix as, this is important for me. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm expecting out of this. This is my hard limit. This is my soft limit. Yes. This is where I go. This is where I don't go. And if you don't do the work within yourself of asking yourself the question before getting in touch with somebody, or because I've been in different situations where you get to that person's place or you're already in bed naked, and then you're like, is this really what I want? Is this a choice? Did I make that right choice? And I feel stuck. But you need to remember, and we're talking about year, 5 year, 10 years or whatever, but it could be we had something together like 2 weeks ago. This week I meet you, and then I don't feel the same way.
Yeah,
in terms of the vibe. Yeah. I'm not feeling the energy that we had, and I'm wondering, is this really what I want? And if you're not sure, it's okay to state it out. It's okay to be like, you know what? I think we should just be kissing and watching a movie or something.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I don't want to have sex tonight, or I don't want to. No, I just don't want to. And
absolutely,
that person, if they don't respect that, you need to put that as a flag.
Exactly. And this is where we go into the respect part that I talked about earlier, because at that point, it almost becomes, well, not almost, it becomes a violation, because you're here trying to persuade that person, but this is not what we talked about. Well, I changed my mind. And it's the same thing as consent, you know. A perfect example, like if you're having a sexual intercourse and then you have already established that you don't want to do a thing with that person, and you want to put a condom. Yes.
You've established you want to put a condom.
And in that relationship, if they decide to just take it out, that's a violation of your rights. Because you established that boundaries, and they didn't respect it, which is why respect is so important. So yeah, I agree 100%. And that's why we need to understand as well, going into a sexual relationship, that setting these boundaries is important. You cannot have a healthy relationship without establishing boundaries.
Without having those conversations. Talking about conversations, we have our first question. People, I'm waiting for your questions. I know we've been here talking to each other. I know. It's nice to have your point of views too. So I'm waiting for your questions. We have our first question, and I think it's from Jesse, but I don't know. So the question is, how and when should families, parents approach sexual health conversations with their children?
Oh, I love that question.
Me too.
So from my point of view, I think that it depends on the child. And I say it depends on the child because children are exposed to many different things.
Yeah.
And there's not a set age for you to talk about that conversation. I think that when I have a kid, the minute they come up to me and they say, "Mama, what is penis?" or "Mama, what is a condom?" it's time to have that conversation because they've already heard it somewhere else, and I'd rather them hear it from me.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, because kids are exposed to, like, nowadays, you know, you have porn, like, it's, you know, you can just easily access it, and kids are learning from that. And what they're learning from it, it's not the healthy way to have sex. And by watching it, they think it's okay. By watching it, they're thinking that, oh, what's happening right now? This is what sex should look like.
Yeah.
So I think having this conversation whenever they bring up that question, and it also depends on where you're growing up. I know, like growing up in Haiti, maybe I was in just in a different kind of circle, but we didn't really talk about sex. That was something that wasn't like in my mind, you
Oh
know,
my God.
like in high school, it wasn't like I'm gonna have sex. It was like, oh my God, he kissed me, you know. So I think it also depends on it depends on where you are. Whereas here, I see it. You know, I work at a middle school where I see kids talking about these things. I know that they are exposed to these things. So in that case, it's important to have that conversation with them,
Yeah.
to explain to them what boundaries are. But no, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I totally agree with there's GKK being like,
I know.
I think I share with them. So we're talking about her brother and sisters who are both doctors, by the way. So I'm like, but yeah, I think that as somebody who's been in touch with little cousins, little, you know, people around me that come up to their parents and their parents are just dismantled by the fact that there's this question. And
Yes.
it goes, by the way, as a kid, asking the question to your parents, seeing your parents being uncomfortable ignites something in them saying, okay, this might not be the right person to talk to about those types of subjects. And this, as a parent, I understand. You don't see your children as sexual beings, but they are kids that need to know the right words and the right definition. And if you're not the one giving them the information, they will find it in other ways.
And yeah, and I think that part as well, it also established a level of trust between the parent and the child. Totally. And going back to the kid going somewhere else to look for that information, the information that they may be accessing might not be the right information that we talk about. This is a perfect time for you to talk to your kid about, this is what consent means. You know, you want to talk about sex? Okay. But you can't talk about sex without consent. And I think by educating her kids, you know, at a younger age, when they ask that question about that, that is a good way as well to prevent sexual assaults from happening, because so often we focus on, you know, well, maybe you shouldn't have done this. Maybe that would not have happened to you. This is how you protect yourself. But the conversation needs to shift. How do we prevent it from happening? You know, because there is the, how do we prevent it from happening? Now that situation has happened, what do we do moving forward, and how do you recover from that situation? What we're not addressing is the, how do we prevent that situation overall from happening?
And how do we give the tools to actually make that person able to react, able to seek help when necessary, able to actually ask the questions that are going through their minds and being like, hey, this is something that I didn't feel comfortable about, Mom. Is this normal? Exactly.
And vice versa for the guy. Well, I say for the guys because women are more often sexually assaulted, but it goes vice versa. If I say the guy, totally. I mean for the girls as well. It's also that part where you, when they're doing something, they may not know that it's right or wrong, like you're saying. So having that conversation with them and letting them know, you know, this is not okay. This is how you should be addressing that situation. And when we're talking about preventing a sexual assault from happening, what I mean by that is that when we talk about sexual assault, we talk about the victims, the survivors. Well, next time when something like that happens to you, this is how you should proceed. But we're not talking about that perpetrator, you know,
that systemic belief, that culture that is around those victims.
Exactly. We're not talking about the culture that is around this thing. We're not talking about how we can address them. So, and I think that goes back into educating, because there's such a big misconception and a lack of education as well in that sense as to what sexual assault is. And sometimes people miss the bigger picture. I will be straight up and tell you that depending on where you are, sexual assault and rape, they have different meaning. And the way I like to explain it to people is that rape is always sexual assault. Sexual assault doesn't always necessarily mean rape, but it's still a violation.
Yes.
And I think it's important.
Yes.
Oops, sorry.
Sorry. Okay.
And I think that it's important when we're having this conversation, these discussions, that people don't, they try to get caught up in the technicality of the definition, but we have, but you also have that, you know, you can't assume that someone is going to know what's right from wrong. If growing up and there are data, like stats about that, you know, boys watching porn so often and they think that it's okay, a lot of the time some of these boys become perpetrators. And I say a lot of the time because I don't have the data and I like to use data. I'm a data oriented person.
Yes, but that is why you're in public health, by the way.
But it happens, you know, they are more likely to be the perpetrators because that's what they see. And going back to the questions, I don't know if we have more questions.
But we do. And
okay, we're gonna like okay.
Okay, so I gotta say, I feel the love and the questions, and I think we're gonna just take another one because we need to end this in order to have a good episode that
not
get
too
people to want to know more. And so I just want to say, Tate, I appreciate your comment. So Tate said, not a question, such an important conversation and topics. I vote for a whole series of this convo between you guys. People need to hear this stuff. Exclamation points to the limit.
Thank you, Tate.
So if there's the last question we're going to take is, if someone you know may be going through a toxic relationship, what can you do to help them get out of it?
That's a very, very good question.
It is.
And I am going to answer this from my personal experience and from what I know. And it may vary. It could be a case-by-case question. So the first thing I'm going to say is that in order for you to help someone, you have to educate yourself on that topic. It might happen that you're not educated on this topic, and that's totally fine, but you need to know what resources are available for that person. You also need to understand that you cannot be too intrusive about what's going on. So if I have a friend who is in a toxic relationship, domestic violence, and they may express that to me, it is not up to me to go and try to dig and say, but what happened to you? What did he do to you? What do you mean it's a toxic relationship? That's not up to me. My role as a friend, my role as an ally, as someone who wants to support, is to say, you know, so-and-so, I know you're going through this. I just want to let you know that I am here for you if you need me. You know, just let me know what you need me to do for you, and I got you. It's also okay for you to say, hey, I've been looking and I found some resources. This is for you. And it takes about 7 times for a person who is in a toxic relationship, domestic violence relationship, to leave that relationship. So the first couple of times that they try, it doesn't happen. So usually it's not until the 7th time. So it's important for you to keep on providing that support and also not to judge that person. Because when you are in a domestic violence situation, or there could be there's different type of domestic abuse, you know? So it could be financially, when that person try to tell you, you know, like, I make the money, so where are you gonna go? They can also convince you to just use our one bank account so that you are not financially stable. So you depend and you rely on that person. When someone is going through a domestic violence, when they are in a domestic violence relationship, they are basically brainwashed in a way to thinking what that person is saying.
Yes.
To thinking what that person is saying is true. It's fact. So for them, leaving that relationship is not necessarily an option, because they are thinking, well, if I leave this relationship, what is it that I'm going to do? This is the only person that I've known. They are my only support, because that's also a part of it. They make you think that, you know, you don't have anyone else. And a big sign, a red flag, is that they are making you distance yourself from your friends.
From everybody else.
From everybody else. So I think it's important to offer your support, unconditional support. And I say unconditional support because as humans, we are so quick to judge people. To judge, well, I told her XYZ and I don't know why she's still in that relationship. You know?
Yes.
And we need to understand that, we need to understand that they may still be in denial. They may still be processing what's happening to them. They may not know what they're going to do next. So provide the resources, be a good friend, not a judgmental friend.
And actually, you don't set, I think it's important that people understand that you are not the one setting standards or boundaries within
Yes.
anybody else's
Yes.
relationship.
Yes.
You as a friend are here to support your friend. And if you are not able to support them within what they're going through, because obviously, if I see a friend suffering from my standards point of view, right, it hurts me and it makes me see this friend as not being able to face those type of situation or to stand up for themselves or whatever. This is the moment where you can actually distance yourself and take a moment in order to get back to helping them. Because if you come from a place of judgment or a place of this does not fit my standards, the standards I have for you, he's not feeding them. This is the moment where you're not in support of that person.
Exactly.
Yes. Exactly. You're part of actually telling them you should do this, you should do that, and we think I have a lot of questions in the comments saying,
one of the questions that I saw that I do want to answer, no, it's about what the toxic relationship is, because I think it's important.
Yes, I have 5 questions like that under the
okay, so perfect. So I think I also want to, before we move on to that last question, it's also important to know that when someone is abusing you, sometimes, well, often they are really good at convincing other people that they're not the abuser, but the partner is the crazy person. So that's also another part of it, because they will convince not just you that is in the relationship, but the other people that are not in that relationship, to make them believe that you're the crazy one or that
problematic.
Things like
you are the
problematic. Yes, that I like that word better. Now, the question is, what is a toxic relationship? There are so many different red flags to that one. I don't think going back to setting boundaries, establishing boundaries. That person is not respecting your boundaries, that's a red flag. And that little red flag, so if I say, you know what, Saturdays is reserved for me to go out with my girls. If my partner was like, you establish that from the get-go without having this conversation. Now your partner decides, well, no, we're staying in tonight. And it becomes a one-time thing. And then you're like, okay, last Saturday I stayed with you. This Saturday it's girls' night, so I want to go see my girls. It can become a behavior that becomes toxic, because now they are distancing you from your friends, and they are taking that time for them, but not in the right way. It wasn't a conversation, let's talk about like girls' night. Communication again is important, but I think toxic relationship red flags, that person is over jealous. I have to see who you're texting. I have to get your phone's password. Like, it's not a conversation, let me have your password and see who you're texting.
This is the problem. The problem with all of this is we are not in a couple. We have one person, and this for me is the definition of a toxic relationship. There are two human beings, fully human and adult beings, who are deciding to create or to have the vision together and to go about it in life.
Yes, exactly.
Now, one of those people decide that this is gonna be that way, and there are no discussions about it.
Yes,
there is no communication. There is no involving the other human being, the other adult that has a say in the vision of that relationship. Because I'll say something very simple. Setting a boundary for me is also, you know what? I need time. I see people who have children and they're like, my partner asked me to have some time alone, not with the children. And we discussed it to know when is it better, how it would be, so that the children don't see that they're actually neglected or whatever you want to call it. And this is a relationship. A toxic relationship would have been, who are you to actually say you want time away from your children? Like, what the hell?
They're your children. You brought them to this world, making you feel guilty.
And judging in that type of fighting mode, and I'm right, you're wrong, and then it creates that type of continuous tension and anxiety. So the problem, I think I would end with that, is the real question you have to ask yourself within your relationship, sexual or not, is, do I fulfill myself? Do I grow? Do I feel heard, understood, appreciated, and
Respected.
recognized, respected within the relationship I've established with someone? If any of those questions are answered by a hard no, not like I don't know, I'm sometimes or something. No. If they're answered with a no, you need to start thinking, why am I still here? What do I get out of this? How am I growing or getting better within that relationship?
Yeah.
And sometimes if you hit a rough spot in your relationship, it doesn't make the relationship go to hell. It just makes you reconsider, are we still having the same vision? Are we still working towards the same goal? Are we still able to be with each other? And the toxic relationship can end very well in terms of establishing, okay, maybe we're not meant to be together. Let's set out rules or I don't know, whatever, in order for us to be able to separate in a kind and respectful way for all of us. But if you don't have those type of discussions, and if you don't question yourself on what is it that I'm getting out of this? What is it? Am I always struggling to actually express myself, to actually be, to exist within that relationship?
Yeah, and I just want to add, while we're saying that as well, we do understand that sometimes you're so in deep in that relationship that it may be hard for you to get out of it. And you might not have that, like, what is it that I'm going to do? Because those little tiny, the guilt was already built up. The controlling is already building up. The jealousy has already built up. You're already in that controlled mindset because those little things are turning into bigger things. And you just don't realize that, life happens. And sometimes when it happens, it's just too late. And that's okay. So understanding that if you are in a toxic relationship, like, one, it's not your fault. It's never your fault. And knowing like the resources, the sources to get, and as a friend, respecting these boundaries and being a support for your friend. But like Nunu said, when it comes to like the establishing the boundaries, it's okay to reconsider. It's okay to revisit these boundaries with your partners. Maybe you like something 2 weeks ago and you don't like it anymore. So definitely communication. We've talked about that. Communication, respect, never assuming what your partner would want or doesn't want. So having that talk is super, super important.
Yay!
Maybe we'll do a part 2. Who knows?
We'll think about a part 2 because I can feel the love. I think that there are subjects to be addressed, and our expertise can always help. Our discussions can always help. I think from the bottom of my heart, this was such a great idea. I love you so
really
much.
I love you
so much. And I send so much love to all of you questioning where you're at in your relationship. Is it good? What is bringing it for me? And it's a lot of introspection and work. And I know everybody's asking for part 2, but can we end part 1 first?
Let's end part 1. Before we end, I do want to thank you, Nunu, for inviting me. She is someone that I really look up to. Like, she inspires me to just get out of my comfort zone. And, we've known each other since the 1st grade, literally. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for everyone who's here, being a part of that discussion. Being a part of that discussion is how you actually start that conversation.
Yes.
So I encourage all of you to go ahead and kind of like, do your own research, learn about it, and look up toxic relationship, because sometimes you are in one and you don't know that you are in one. But also know that if you have questions, I'm here to answer. I'm pretty sure we're both here to answer.
We're both here to answer, no matter the question. And I think that it's valuable to say you have her and you have the strength to actually address the things that you don't like, and not addressing them is not fixing them. So state it out.
Don't put a band-aid on it.
To bring joy into my life, to bring respect, to bring consent, to bring everything that I need in order to be fulfilled.
Exactly.
So preach. Amen to
that.
Okay, so I love you, and I wish everybody a brilliant day, and on to the next one, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Okay, bye.
But yeah, the live will be here for like 24 hours, right, Nuno? And are you uploading this to your?
I'm uploading thing as an episode because it lasted a little bit longer. Maybe it's not gonna be there for another 24 hours.
Oh,
but I'll post the discussion for sure, so that we can ignite conversation.
All right, love. Bye. Thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thank you everyone.
Love
Bye.
you, Nuno.